welcome back. It's time for my November wrap-up. Overall, November was a great reading month. It wasn't my best this year, but I hardly think that I'll be able to match the 20 books I read in, I think it was May or something. So regardless, I managed to read 11 and a half books. That one half is for this book, which I actually didn't finish, but we're gonna get to that a little bit later in the video. Overall, I can say that I enjoyed most of the books that I've read, and there were, however, a few instances which were a bit unfortunate. So, without further ado, let's get started with one of the more anticipated releases that I read in November, and that was Blood and Honey. So, this is the second book in the Serpent and Dove trilogy. Originally, from what I remember, it was supposed to be a duology, so this was supposed to be the last book, but Serpent and Dove became so popular that they actually extended the series. So I don't know if it's gonna be like a trilogy or if it's gonna there are gonna be more books, but anyway, this was supposed to be the last book. It isn't, and it kind of shows, because I didn't enjoy this. Yeah, it's quite unfortunate, because this is one of the most beautiful books that I own. It's got sprayed edges, there's this amazing artwork on the reverse of this jacket, so it's really beautiful, but unfortunately the content doesn't really match the cover. So my main problems with this book are the same as my problems with Serpent and Dove. I gave both of these 3 stars, but if I have to be honest, I don't really think that they deserve 3 stars. My main problem with this book and the first book in the series was that the plot is very simplistic and doesn't really make much sense. So without me going into spoilers, the whole premise of the story is that in this land, which is based on medieval France, they're witches, but the witches are being persecuted, and the local authority, the king, absolutely hates them and wants them exterminated. And so the queen of the witches devises this plan to kill the king, because she thinks that if they kill the king, that's suddenly gonna solve all their problems, which to me seems absolutely ridiculous, because everyone in this land hates the witches, so even killing the king is not gonna suddenly resolve all the problems. Anyway, so the head witch devises this plan, which is 20 years in the making, and it's a ridiculous plan, absolutely ridiculous plan. That plan fails, and she's like, oh well, moving on to plan B. And plan B was much more sensible, and I completely failed to see why the need for plan A was there in the first place, because they had to wait for 20 years, they had to sacrifice things, and it was all this convoluted idea which made absolutely no sense. And it seems to me that the only reason was that the author needed the characters to have this incentive and to push the characters together, because the characters are much more fleshed out than the plot, and the plot is the whole story is a backdrop of the characters' love story. And it seems to me that the author just needed to have this plot, which doesn't really make sense and it's not important, just so that she could explore the characters. And yeah, the characters are great, their love story is great, and it's very it develops in this book, but the plot was so simplistic and so ridiculous. And to be honest, the ending of this book was kind of even worse, because there was this Deus Ex Machina moment, and I absolutely hate that. I hate that. It's such a cheap way to solve all your problems, to have this very powerful figure come and just solve everything for you. Anyway, I'm not gonna rant anymore. I didn't enjoy this one. I thought it was gonna be better than Serpent and Dove, if I have to be honest, but seeing, based off the reviews on Goodreads, I see that most people didn't enjoy this, because Serpent and Dove has a lot of high ratings, and this one has very low ratings, like in comparison to the first book. So yeah, apparently I wasn't the only one who didn't enjoy this book. Anyway, moving on to another sequel that I read last month, and this is A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. So this is the second book in the Blood and Ash trilogy from Jennifer L. Armentrout. I absolutely adored the first book from Blood and Ash. It's one of my favorite books of the year. I highly, highly recommend it. So this book is the second book in the series. It picks up exactly where the first book left off. I'm not gonna spoil anything. I really enjoyed this one, not as much as I did from Blood and Ash, because like the whole middle part of this book was kind of repetitive, because we had the main characters just like working out the issues they had with each other and kind of slowly getting to know more about the world. And that was it. While it was interesting, I just found some of the scenes very repetitive, because we had seen like the same, not exactly the same situation, but like the same premise of a situation repeated over and over and over again, just so that the characters could like come into terms with their own abilities, with their position into their own society. So yeah, it was still very good. I had an absolute blast reading this, but it just wasn't as kind of mysterious and you know, informative in a sense as the first book was. And I'm saying informative because in the first book we had a lot of mysteries in regards to the world, because we were discovering the world along with the main character, because the main character had no idea like what was going on and what the world was about. And in this book it's the same, like we get more questions, but we don't get answers, which obviously like everything's going to be resolved in the final book, but I just feel that we might have been given more answers. I just think that this was kind of very obviously a second book in a series. I'm still gonna be reading the final book as it comes out, because like there was this cliffhanger at the end, which was, oh my god. But yeah, I still gave this 4 stars. 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I liked From Blood and Ash a little bit more. Next up, I read The Inheritance Gains. So this is a YA contemporary novel. It focuses around this girl who receives an inheritance. So it's like, I was kind of wondering whether it was gonna be a murder mystery or a mystery of some sort, because from the synopsis, it doesn't really explain what kind of book we're getting. Was it gonna be like contemporary romance? Was it gonna be just contemporary fiction? Was it gonna be just murder mystery? What was it gonna be? Because it centers around this girl who is very hard off. She doesn't have any money. She's just taking care of herself. She's in high school, and suddenly she receives this inheritance, and we're talking about billions. And it turns out that the guy who left her all this money wasn't actually like without family. Instead, he kind of skipped his whole family and left everything to her, and she doesn't know this guy. So the mystery kind of starts from there. And like there is this kind of stipulation in the will that she has to live with his family for a year. The family that he kind of overlooked because of her, so naturally they hate her. And that family has like 4 teenage sons. So there's like this little romantic subplot going on, and slowly like we were finding out a little bit more about like what was going on, but this is not a standalone, so there's gonna be at least 1 more book. So by the end of the book we didn't actually get any answers, and I really enjoyed this book. I still don't know how it's gonna like all tie together, and obviously like it depends on the next book and like what the ending is gonna be, but I think it's got a lot of potential. For the bigger part of the book, I wasn't sure what we were doing, like what kind of story we were looking for. I still am not sure, you know. there are mysteries, but I don't know if it's gonna, like, the whole thing is gonna escalate, or if it's gonna go in a completely different direction from what I'm thinking. So overall, it left me kind of confused as to the direction in which this was going, but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, and it's one of those books which I realized that I enjoyed it very much after I finished reading it. Like, while I was reading it, I had these doubts and like, how is this gonna like all come together? But after I finished it, I realized that I actually missed the characters and the setting, and I really cannot wait to read the next book. So I highly recommend this one if you're looking for like a mystery, but not a very obvious mystery, in the sense that it's not your typical murder mystery where a bunch of people get killed and you're trying to investigate, and we're not trying to investigate like why this guy died who left her the money. We're trying to investigate why he left her the money. So it's a bit of a twist on your normal like murder mystery and just a mystery novel. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed it. The next book I read was The Madness of Lord Ian McKenzie. So this is a historical romance. I have been trying to get into reading romance more, and I really like historical novels. So I figured that historical romance is a great way for me to like start exploring the genre. Overall, I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This is the first in a series. So the whole series follows this family. I think there are 4 brothers, and each brother gets his own book. In the first book, we get to follow the youngest brother, Ian, who is on the spectrum, and obviously, like in Victorian times, people didn't really know what that was, so he was dubbed the Mad Lord Ian McKenzie, and he was sent into an asylum, and he spent like part of his life there, which was very traumatic for him, and just a very, very horrible time in his life. But he's out of the asylum now, and he sees this young widow. He falls in love with her. A lot of things happen, and the reason I enjoyed this one so much is that besides the romantic plot, there was another subplot which was like a murder mystery kind of going on, and it was very well executed. It managed to surprise me, and I read a lot of murder mysteries. So for a book that wasn't centered around the murder mystery, instead like it had a whole different focus, but that was like the subplot, and the subplot was so good that it managed to surprise me, and I feel like this was such a great thing, and I absolutely loved it. I loved it, and the romance was so sweet. Like, Lord Ian is amazing. He was such a cinnamon roll. The main character was a strong, independent woman who wasn't acting out, like, she wasn't acting in a way that's like weird for the time period she was living. Instead, like, she was independent in a way that was more subtle, and I loved that. I absolutely loved it. I loved both Ian and Beth, and I loved the plot. Overall, I highly recommend this one if you're looking for a great historical romance. I'm currently reading the second book in this series. I am at the beginning, so I don't really know how I feel about it yet, but I'll definitely talk about it in my next month's wrap-up. And the half book I mentioned at the beginning of the video was the one book that I did not finish, and it's not because I didn't like it, but I just feel like this wasn't the right moment for me to read this book, and this is Malice by John Gwynne. So I read around 200 pages. So I read a third, because it's like 600 pages in total, and maybe last month just wasn't the right month for a high fantasy. I don't know, but I wasn't feeling it. I didn't feel any connection with the characters, and the first 200 pages are a setup. So I get it, like, the world is very big, and we get to follow like a lot of different characters. So for the first 200 pages, there were like 5 different points of view. And I have the suspicion that the points of view are gonna like expand, in the sense like we're gonna get more people's points of view as the story progresses, which is not a bad thing. It's just that I really didn't care about any of those 5 points of view, which meant that the these 200 pages were kind of like, I had to force myself to read it, and I'm pretty sure that I can enjoy this book very much because I see that it's very well written. I see that this world is huge and interesting, and there's magic and there's like mystery going on, so I can definitely enjoy it. It's just that right at this moment I didn't care about the characters, and that's kind of a problem for me, because on one hand I don't want a book like Blood and Honey, which had great characters but like silly plot, but on the other hand I cannot really enjoy a book which has great plot but like not interesting characters, and this is what I feel like was happening here. But again, I feel like it might have been a timing thing. But anyway, like yeah, it's 200 pages of exposition, which that's fine. This series it contains like 4 books, which yeah, I get why there are 200 pages of exposition, but I think I need to read it at a different moment. Basically this story, like for the first 200 pages, it follows these characters from different parts of this world, and they kind of get summoned, some of them, to this reunion of kings, because like the High King wants to discuss something with all the other kings. That's it. That's it. Like, I mean, it's probably more interesting than it sounds, but there's like a lot of description, a lot of like very minor details being discussed, which is normal for high fantasy. I wasn't in the mood for that. Next I read 5 Agatha Christie novels. I'll put the covers over here. I enjoyed most of them. The lowest one I ranked was The Secret of Chimneys. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Why Didn't They Ask Evans? I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then The Seven Dials Mystery, I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The Spider's Web, 4 out of 5 stars, and Death Comes at the End, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. This one is one of my favorite Agatha Christie novels of all time. It's set in ancient Egypt, which is, as far as I know, the only novel set in ancient times, like not in, you know, her own time. But I'm planning on doing a whole separate video on Agatha Christie, because by now I've already read like her Hercule Poirot series, her Miss Marple series, and I'm kind of making my way through her standalones. So I won't go into detail right now. And what else did I read last month? Oh yeah, so I read Spellbreaker, which surprised me very pleasantly. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. This is a fantasy novel, but it's like kind of steampunkish, not very steampunk, like it's a Victorian alternate setting, reality set in England, and it follows this one character who is an unlicensed magician. If she's discovered that she's an unlicensed magician, she's gonna be like put in prison or killed. Her specialty is breaking spells, which I found was quite interesting. Like, she cannot cast spells, but she can break them, and she's working for this kind of underground organization, helping them out, help like people. I'm not gonna say anything else because it's gonna be a spoiler, but this story managed to surprise me. It's a very different take on magic in Victorian times, so I really enjoyed this book. The second book is coming out in a couple of months, I think, or in March, I don't know. Anyway, it's coming out soon. I fully intend on reading it. It's got a slight romantic subplot, which I found was very cute. It was very nice. The main characters are amazing. The male main character is from Barbados, and he's a magician, unlike the heroine, who is a spellbreaker. So their abilities kind of are on the opposite sides of the magic system, and it was very interesting to explore their relationship and their friendship, because they become friends first. So it was great. I absolutely enjoyed it. If you're looking for a book which is not very challenging in terms of it's not a very heavy fantasy, but still is very intelligently written and intelligently plotted. The plot is very intelligent, with very likable characters. I highly recommend this one. And finally, the last book that I read last month was unfortunately my only 2-star read of the month, and it was Deception by Gaslight. So this is a mystery novel set in the Gilded era, time, like late 19th century in the US. Oh, it was, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was very disappointed. Basically, the main mystery was related to housing reform and like fraud, which is as boring as it sounds. The mystery was kind of ridiculous. There were no stakes because the main character was kind of got involved in the mystery because she's a journalist and she wanted to write a story. So obviously the stakes weren't high. I mean, she wasn't involved in any like personal way or anything. It was just she wanted to write a story, and that's how she got like involved in the mystery, which was just so right off the start the stakes weren't high. The characters were kind of cliche. There wasn't anything wrong with this book in particular. I just didn't enjoy it at all. But yeah, it's just I found it boring. I didn't care about the characters, and yeah, that was it. So I'm definitely not gonna continue on with this series. But yeah, apart from this kind of disappointing read, I kind of enjoyed most of the books that I read in November, and I really hope that December is gonna be even better. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!